Hello, everyone. Welcome to the book launch for the Resilience Workbook for Kids. I am super excited to be here with you with an all-star, rock star lineup you are all going to see. My name is Renee Jain. I am honored to be here with the authors of this new amazing workbook. And before we go any further, I am shamelessly and not shamelessly at all actually promoting this. I would love Caren or Rebecca if you guys can drop in where we can get this amazing workbook. And then I would like to go ahead and introduce you to our panel today. So today we have with us Dr. Caren Baruch Feldman. She is a clinical psychologist and a certified school psychologist. She has authored numerous articles, led workshops on helping children and adults cope with stress and worry, developing grit and self-control, and helping people make positive change. Dr. Baruch Feldman is the author of The Grit Guide for Teens and now the co-author of the Resilience Workbook for Kids. And you guys are going to get sick of me holding this up, but I love it. I love the cover. I love the contents. So I'm going to hold it up multiple times. We also have with us Rebecca Camizio, a nationally certified school psychologist who was named Connecticut's 2019 School Psychologist of the Year. Rebecca is the founder and co-host of the School Psyched podcast. Love that podcast. She is also a proud mama of 4 and also a fur baby, I believe. We can ask you about that in a bit. Rebecca is the co-author of 70 play activities for better thinking, self-regulation, learning, and behavior. She's also the co-author of this new workbook on resilience. And we have also with us Dr. Robert Brooks. He is a clinical psychologist on the faculty of Harvard Medical School with deep expertise in the area of resilience. During the past 40 years, Dr. Brooks has presented nationally and internationally to thousands of parents, educators, professionals, and business people. Among the 19 books Dr. Brooks has authored or co-authored, they include Raising Resilient Children, The Power of Resilience, and Handbook of Resilience in Children. Dr. Brooks also wrote the foreword to, you guessed it, Resilience Workbook for Kids. And we have with us, of course, Dr. Ken Ginsberg, a pediatrician who's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. Shout out to the University of Pennsylvania, also my alma mater. He is the founding director of the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. In addition to his research publications, Dr. Ginsberg has award-winning parenting books, including Building Resilience in Children and Teens, as well as the forthcoming Congrats, You're Having a Teen, Strengthen Your Family and Raise a Good Person. Best title ever, by the way. Dr. Ginsberg lectures widely to national and international parent and professional audiences on the topic of resilience. So, by the way, just so you guys know, those are the abbreviated bios, okay? So there is a lot of amazing, beautiful experience here. We are so excited to have you here with us. And today we're going to be celebrating and talking to Caren and Rebecca about this new amazing workbook that they have put together. And I think if you were listening to the bios just now, you heard the word resilience over and over again. And I think maybe that's the place to start. So for Caren and Rebecca, there are many definitions of resilience. I'm sure everybody listening has their own intuition about what this means to them. How would you define resilience?
So for me, I feel like, again, there are a million different definitions, but I think for me, at the heart of it is the idea about the ability to cope with stress and adversity, to be able to bounce back. And sometimes people also ask me, because I did write a book on grit. So they say, what's the difference between resilience and grit? And so for me, grit, which comes from Angela Duckworth's work, is about having passion and perseverance for long-term goals. It's about being able to stay with something and really feeling a connection to something in the long term. Whereas resilience for me is more about that ability to handle challenges and be able to have the coping skills to manage those difficult situations.
Absolutely. I want to just jump in and say, we hear this word beyond our little wonderful group here so often because it's such it's so prevalent in our culture right now, because it's what we need in these times, to foster and help support our children to become. And resilience is often considered very natural to human beings. We say, oh, kids are so resilient. And that is true. Kids are resilient. But when we can intentionally teach the skills of resilience, we can provide children with the support and the skills and the practice and the scaffolding that they need to really rise through adversities and come out better, come out with some learning. So
Wonderful. I would love to ask Ken and Bob, and your experience in the work that you guys do, what does resilience mean to you?
Do you want me to go first, Ken? And I just want to say it's such a pleasure. I so admire Ken's work to be on the panel with him. Actually, what Caren said is very close to the definition I use. There are a lot of definitions, but basically, and not to overly simplify it, I really have felt very strongly that resilience is the ability to cope with adversity. It's not that resilient children and adults are not going to face adversity, but when adversity comes up, I have often said resilient kids see basically these adversity or problems as things to be solved rather than overwhelmed by. Because in my talks, I'll often ask an audience, have any of you ever faced a problem where your first thought is, I don't even know where to start? And I quickly raised my hand, and if people are being honest, most raised theirs. And I said, imagine if almost every problem you faced, you felt that way. And that's when people start feeling hopeless and helpless. That's when they feel more anxious and depressed. So why I love this book also so much is that it really gives wonderful strategies so that you don't feel that helpless feeling, that you do feel you can cope with this adversity. And for kids, it's even knowing when to ask adults to help them with the adversity they face.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ken.
I would add a piece. So first off, I am humbled as well to be with such a gifted panel, and I've followed Dr. Brooks's work for I think decades, and to be with Caren and Rebecca now, I really feel privileged. I agree with everything that everybody said, but I would add a piece that I think is critically important. We shouldn't have as our goal that we're able to cope with adversity. That's our baseline, right? What we have to acknowledge is that not only when we raise young people to be able to cope, to manage adversity, they're also able to thrive better in the best of times. So look at what Rebecca and Caren have done in this book. They put as central the power of human connection. They put as central the ability to celebrate, elevate emotions. So yes, this allows you to recover from adversity. This allows you to handle adversity, but this is what enables you to flourish. And so we have to remember that the seeds of flourishing lie in resilience.
I love that. Rebecca and Caren, some of what I'm hearing from everyone, these sound like really lofty concepts, Are they things that we can actually teach to kids? So my question is, why did you feel that it was important for you to write a book for children, and how did you sort of approach that?
Well, Renee, we started writing just at the start of the pandemic, but even before, over the last 10 years before the pandemic, we have seen a steady and significant increase in the rate of anxiety in young people, and depression. The American Psychological Association recently published a report called Stress in America 2020, a national mental health crisis. And in their survey, they sampled 1,026 teenagers ages 13 to 17 and found that young people are really struggling with uncertainty, experiencing elevated stress, and reporting symptoms of depression. So we feel like this trend has grown so far, and we really need to get to our youngest people and try to give them the tools to get in front of it. And I think we believe we can do that, and especially the collective we adults that care about young people, we can do this together, and it's more important than ever because we really need to reverse some of these concerning trends.
And just to add to what Rebecca was saying is that in terms of what we saw was out there in terms of books, there's a lot out there, and there are books direct for kids. But I think what we wanted to fill this niche was to give a book for kids to do for themselves. Like there are books for parents, there's books for educators, there's books for teens, but for children to kind of be able to build those skills. You know, as people, Rebecca and I both work in a school, and we're sort of in the front line. We both, make programs. Actually, just today, I went into a third grade class and taught them about self-control. So we really wanted to make these sort of almost like little like lessons or ideas and have them work through them so that they could feel that sense of accomplishment. And we treat the resilience as a skill, just like we would teach reading and writing. We wanted to make it as like a skill-based type of book.
I know that sometimes parents, I'm a parent myself, I have an 8 and a 9-year-old, sometimes parents get busy, right? And sometimes when they hear something like that, they think, and it is in a workbook format, which is amazing. And I'm just going to flip it open so that you guys can see. There's a lot of beautiful illustrations in here, a lot of things for kids to do. Is this something that a parent hands to their kid and says, become resilient, do it, make it happen? How ideally do you use a tool like this?
Well, we believe that resilience starts and ends with the adults. So as much as we want kids to really own this and take it on themselves and tackle the lessons, the activities, and the puzzles, in the beginning, we share with our readers the online sections, which include sections for parents and professionals and educators. And we really encourage in the structure of our lessons parent participation. So we believe that the younger the reader is, the more these lessons and activities are opportunities for real connection. And in the structure of our lessons, we build that right in, because in the beginning of each section is the Learn It section, which is the reading and the psychoeducation and the lesson piece. After that, there's the Do It, which is the activity, and kids can do those activities on their own. But I think it would be really nice for them to share that learning part with the adults and talk to them about what they're learning. And then after, there's a Strengthen It, which is a practice section, and a share with your special adult. So we really felt like that was really important to build and weave in through all of the chapters and lessons and activities.
Okay, so I just wanted to highlight one thing because I want to make sure that it doesn't get missed. When you purchase this workbook, there are additional online tools for the educator and for the parent. Is that what I heard?
Yes. So
Okay.
there is an online section for parents and professionals. There's an online section for educators. And then because we even had more ideas that we couldn't fit in the book, we also have bonus activities and the reference section that's all online. The book is really also really based on research. And, the references are also really important to us. Those are also online so people can see where we got these ideas. I think that what Rebecca and I are strong at is being able to take researchers' ideas and being able to write about them in ways that are more accessible and so that they can be used by like the lay people. And that's what we try to do in the book. The other thing is in terms of the way it's set up, there's a Learn It, Do It, Strengthen It, and then there's this bonus section where in that bonus section, it's always done with your special adult. So there's activities there that really work that relationship and try to encourage that connection. Because I like what Ken said, I feel like our book is very much based on this idea of connection as being at the heart of what resilience is about.
Beautiful. I think that is also a great segue, to ask Ken, in your work with kids and with teens, how important is the family unit? How important is it to have an adult, that connection to go through a process in cultivating resilience?
It's critically important. When a parent sees all that is good and right in the child, when a parent holds someone to the high expectations of who they really are, that's exactly what gives a young person the security that's going to allow them to launch into adulthood. Life is going to be challenging. Challenges, disappointments, challenges from friendships. And the question is, to what extent will those challenges affect your self-worth? A simple way of looking at it is this: why do we love? We love so that young people know that they're worthy of being loved. And when a parent is able to instill within a child that they are worthy of their attention and their love, and that that person knows who they are more deeply and more fully than anyone else in their universe, imagine the security that that gives you to be able to bounce back from difficult times and again, thrive in the best of times.
I just have a follow-up question to that. So the worth that one feels, I often think when kids come into the world, they have that. They have that abundance, they have that connection, they have that worth. It is there that they feel that, if they're lucky, they feel that, right? How does that start to get chipped away at? What happens as kids get older where that needs to be reinforced, with like a beautiful, book like this?
Who would like to respond?
Bob, how about you take my question?
Well, I actually, well, there are a lot of ways it can get chipped. I'd actually like to follow up a little with what others have said. If you look at the research, and I don't want to be too researchy here, if you look at the research, starting with, I think, Emmy Werner, who I consider the matriarch of resilience research, when adults were interviewed who had very difficult childhoods and now were doing relatively well in life, thriving, and they were interviewed, and studies were done with kids who grew up in war zones, kids who grew up in abusive homes, but were doing really well now. And you ask them, what do you think was one of the most important things in your childhood or adolescence to help you to be resilient and as hopeful? The first answer is always the same. There was at least one adult, hopefully many, who believed in them and stood by them. And one of my heroes in the field of psychology, Julius Siegel, from Washington, D.C., he called that adult a charismatic adult in a child's life. Now, I almost wish he hadn't used the word charismatic because it has different meanings to different people, but his definition really is nothing short of poetic: an adult from whom a child or adolescent gathers strength. And so what that invited in my work is people, when I would talk about charismatic adults, the question was, and that's why I'm going to get back to this wonderful book, well, what does a charismatic adult say or do? How does one develop this sense of worth? What actually goes into it? And I just want to expand, I know I'm running over a little here on something. In the model of resilience I've used, I also look at a lot of the social, what we call social emotional characteristics. And just to give you one example, one of the first books I ever wrote was about school climate. And in researching that book, I asked 1,500 adults in a questionnaire, what is one of your most positive memories of school? Something that boosted your self-worth, your motivation. One of the first answers everyone gave was when they were asked to help out. The relationship was there and they were asked to help out. And what we're finding is throughout the lifespan, because I've always worked with children, adolescents, and adults, one of the things that really helps people to thrive is when they feel they're making a positive difference in the life of others. And there's wonderful research to show at-risk kids, I'll call them in quotes, at schools ready to drop out are less likely to drop out if you ask them to go and read to younger kids an hour or two a week. Senior citizens are much less likely to be depressed and lonely if they even volunteer an hour a week. So there are many components of this. And again, I'm going to give a plug because I love the book, not just because I wrote the foreword. all of the things that I consider part of a resilient mindset, and Ken's work is similar. Somehow, Rebecca and Caren have found wonderful exercises to capture these. So it's very practical. And now when people ask me, are there any workbooks out there that you would recommend? I have a workbook to highly recommend.
Yes.
Go on a little there, but I really wanted to expand on Ken's notion of thrive.
No, beautiful. Thank
And
you.
I just want
Rebecca,
to expand on something
yes.
that Bob touched upon about that idea about helping other people. In my school, sometimes I'll have kids who, especially during COVID, that were really struggling. And then I felt like I had almost Bob in my ear, and I would be like, "Do you want to help me organize my office? Do you want to help me, with this other kid?" And I found like when kids were given that opportunity to either help me or help other people, I was able to get those kids who were definitely more at risk to open up and to form a relationship and then to feel more confident. And then it all becomes like a positive cycle up. And so I can't, I don't want to, I feel like it's such an important idea about this notion of helping other people, and having kids have that opportunity is such an important way to build resilience.
Can I add
Beautiful.
one more point there, or are we getting too loud?
No,
No,
add a
please do.
point.
So your ultimate act of resilience is to be able to turn to another human being and say, brother or sister, I need a hand, right? What is it that enables you to be able to do that? As long as you believe that there's shame or stigma on the other side, or that the person is judging you, you're never going to reach, which means that when you really need support, you're not going to reach. So I believe that this contribution piece, contributing to other people, what it does is it teaches you that it feels good to serve. And when you know that it feels good to serve, then when it's your turn, you can receive without shame because you know the person's not pitying you. So all this meaning, purpose, contribution, however you want to word it, it ultimately is key to intergenerational resilience, but also to the very worst moments in our lives.
Yeah.
I love this so much because, and Caren, one thing that you said about asking someone to come into your office right now, how do you want to help right now, I think is so important for kids. Often when we are talking about these things, we're talking about the future. What are you going to contribute to the world when you grow up 20 years from now? But they can contribute now, and they want to contribute now. They want to be part of something bigger now. And it doesn't have to be bigger, Mother Teresa bigger. It just can be something bigger. And I'm sorry, Rebecca, you wanted to jump in.
No, I just wanted to share a really sweet comment in the chat. I don't know if you all can see it, but I can see them. So sweet. And we have another wonderful comment. I'm loving the chat.
Yay! I love it. So this one, I would like to come back just and ask about components to nurture resilience, right? So you break down a lot of different exercises in the book, and I know that this could be a very long answer, and we've already started touching on it. But Caren and Rebecca, what are some of those components that really help nurture resilience in kids?
So we like acronyms. I know, Renee, you also like acronyms. So
My
we have a lot
publisher
of
does not like
acronyms in the book.
acronyms.
And also I have an affinity for the water. I grew up on the water, and my dad, who is not with us anymore, but was such a resilient man, he was also very much in love boating. So we use a lot of those metaphors to talk about resilience. And the one that we sort of use as the framework for the book is storms. Also, resilience and storms kind of make sense. So in terms of a framework, and this is also a little bit the structure of the book, is that first it starts with adults. So we really believe strongly that resilience starts with adults, in that adults first need to have their cup full, that they need to figure out ways to build their own resilience. And in that online section where we again encourage the person who's buying the book to read first, we have them build their own resilience, assess their own resilience, and then teach them skills to help the person who's in their charge. So that starts with adults. Then then we want you to teach yourself the skills of resilience. We believe that resilience is a skill that can be taught and be broken down just like anything else. And so to see it as more of a skill-based thing to learn. And then O is to own all your emotions. I think one of the things that's also a little bit unique about our book is I think that Rebecca and I are both very interested in helping kids manage and talk about emotions. I think there are many books that are cognitive behavioral or positive psychology, but I think that we did, like, we really, and based on a lot of Mark Brackett's work, we talk a lot about emotions, both positive emotions, trying to, pump them up. And we have these different posters. Actually, Rebecca is showing us the storms poster. We also have this pump up the positive poster as well. And also accepting the yuck, which is the idea of that it's not liking the yuck, but it's to accept that yuck. And then R is, we want to put back up the storms one.
Oh,
And then
sorry.
she has the pump up the positive emotion. That's a poster that we have. And then you have, do you want to show the accept the yuck? And then I'll go back to the other one.
Okay.
So we made these posters, which again are also part of like the tools that when you go to New Harbinger, you can get these glossy posters as well. That's the accept the yuck.
Love the posters. Love the acronyms. Do not listen to the acronym haters. Acronyms are good.
So to go back to the storm, so then R is to rule your mind, which is basically, that's the cognitive part, teaching kids about ways that they can think about things differently. We don't always have control over the situation, but we always have a choice about how we're going to think about it. And then followed by managing your behaviors. It's not enough just to change your thoughts. I'm a big believer you have to then change that behavior. And then again, it goes back to support, structure, culture, community, seek support. So sort of ends that way. And that's kind of the chapters are in the book are sort of set up that way. With what we also did in terms of just the structure, we talked about that learn it, do it, strengthen it bonus, but we also have these challenging puzzles at the end of each chapter to check your knowledge and also to give you again that experience of building resilience. Believe me, I tried those puzzles, and we actually have Debbie who made those puzzles for us. They're tough. And by doing these things, you get that experience of having to talk to yourself in a positive way and then actually do it, and then maybe get that support you need to experience resilience even within the workbook.
Amazing. I love this. I love the imagery. I love the acronyms. I think it's super sticky for kids. Rebecca, go for it.
Just wanted to jump in and add on that, the stickiness, because Caren and I both work in schools and we work with the most amazing, brilliant teachers. We learned a lot about how kids learn. And so as we were, thinking about how we wanted to format each chapter and each section, we really thought about the instructional hierarchy. And so the learn it is the acquisition phase. We define vocabulary, we break big concepts into little pieces. And that's really when kids are acquiring the knowledge from that lesson. And then the do it is the practice is more of a fluency stage where they can start to become fluent with some of the ideas by applying them to different puzzles and challenges. And then we really hope that as they're working with their special adult, they'll get into more of a generalization phase where they're taking all of this that they've learned from the chapter and really applying it to the people that they love, the grown-ups around them.
It's so fascinating because I feel like if people are looking at this poster, just from looking at it, there may be a judgment about what age this workbook is appropriate for. But as I'm listening to you, it feels so ageless that this can apply to any age. So I would love to know, Caren and Rebecca, from you guys, and then I want to also hear from Bob and Ken, but I'd love to know who you intended the book for. Who's the target audience? What's the target age for the book?
Well, my main building where I work is 1st through 4th grade. And while I knew that 1st graders and some 2nd graders would need a lot of support in the learning part, the reading part of it, not because even if they're strong readers, the concepts are deep. But we did want 1st and 2nd graders to be able to access the book with their caregivers and teachers and other grown-ups in their lives. But really, ideally, The language we wanted to make really accessible for ages 7 to 12. But I'd say probably the sweet spot is 8 to 12, I would say.
Yeah, so earlier backstage, before we came live, we were kind of talking about this age thing and who the book is for. And Ken, you had some pretty insightful comments. I would love for you to share a couple of those with us in terms of what you thought about the tone of the book.
Yeah, so I'm a pediatrician, and for the record, I used to teach nursery school. With that said, I'm an adolescent specialist, so I always think about whether or not this would be good for adolescents. And so when I was looking at it again, I realized that what's beautiful about this is that while the language is simple, it wouldn't feel condescending to an adolescent to experience this. And I think an adolescent could go through this themselves and have fun. But there's a new idea I've thought of since we spoke backstage. And it was really when Dr. Brooks talked about the research in various contexts that shows how older children support younger children. And there's ample research that suggests that when older children are the vehicles to either tutor or support younger children, both benefit in a very large way, more so than even when adults were involved. You know what I would love?
Mhm.
I would love to see some teenagers have to learn this so they can support their younger brothers and sisters and go through it. That would be a home run.
Yes.
It's so funny when Ken said that, because that was one of my thoughts. And I'm going to add something else. I think many parents using this book, what's the best way of saying this? When I was reading it, I was also thinking, any parent using this book, because the guidelines are so clear, would be doing a lot of thinking about their own lives and their own resilience. So, what Ken just said about certainly teenagers doing it, I think we learn a great deal when we're teaching kids. Well, we often have said, we learn best when we're teaching something as well. So in reading this, my thought went to some of my adult patients. I think it would be, how do you present it to them could benefit also, because Caren and Rebecca have done a wonderful job in really articulating those components of resilience. And what I really love, and we've all talked about it, it's such a beautiful strength-based model. For like in the 1980s, I coined the term, every child has islands of competence or strengths. And a big mistake I made as a beginning therapist was I thought people came to see me because their kid had problems, which was true. So I speak to parents or teachers and spend the entire time mainly looking out. It was an old deficit model. And things changed so much when I started after just 10, 15 minutes saying, now that I've heard about a few of the problems that you came to see me, what do you see as your child's passions, their strengths? And it actually opened up more avenues for people to consider, use Ken's word, their self-worth, and to really connect much more with their child around their beauties and strengths.
Yeah, that's incredible. What we're talking about, Bob, when you hit on an adult going through this book, and I'm just thinking of really just healing your inner child. I know there are probably so many parents out there, especially during COVID, they weren't feeling so resilient themselves. And they might even be thinking, how am I going to teach this to my child when I don't even know if I have those skills? And, I really do think what Ken and Bob both said, that this is laid out so beautifully and so cleanly that it really is universal. It doesn't have to be for kids. So you buy 2 copies, one for yourself and one for your kids. Please. All right. So now, we know about the book. I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get the book. How do you get the book? Is it everywhere? I know there's a special promotion going on. You post that, Rebecca, in the comments. There's a 30% off promotion going on.
Yes, it's just till
real?
April 1st, because it's sort of
That's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow. It's the pre-publication discount. If you go directly to New Harbinger and put in the code RES30, you'll get 30% off until tomorrow.
That's amazing. This is not an April Fool's joke. It is actually 30% off promo. You guys have to get it. It's so good. So now we know about your book, but we're doing this kind of in reverse. This is a question that usually comes out first. Why did you guys write this book? Is there a story behind it? Do you have your own resilience story? I'd love to hear a little bit.
Okay. Should I go first, Caren?
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay. Well, I really think of my child self when I think of resilience, because I have a resilience story that really started with my parents, who immigrated to this country from India, and were able to escape some pretty serious poverty to get here. And so my parents had an arranged marriage. They didn't know each other before. And it really became more and more clear when I was young that my mother wasn't well. And she ended up having a serious mental illness, which we didn't know about at the time. It was the 70s. Don't calculate my age. But it was really difficult for me, because all I knew was that she wasn't like the other moms. I grew up born in New York City, and then eventually moved to the suburbs, and we moved to a suburb of New York that was a very small village. It was 1 square mile, and we were the only family of color in my entire elementary school. And I'd go to school every day, and the kids would ask me, "What are you?" And, at 5 years old, I didn't know what they meant, but I did know that I just didn't feel like I belonged. And so my father was just this brilliant, wonderful man who would tell me who I was. And I would take those words with me to school, and I would hold them in my heart, because it was not easy. And eventually, my parents got divorced, and my father was able to get custody of my sister and I, which was really wonderful, because my mom, she just wasn't able to take care of herself or us. And so I learned a lot about resilience, and I learned it really the hard way by causing myself a lot of additional suffering and pain, because I just, took out my misunderstanding and my hurt and all of that in really unhelpful ways. And so writing this book, what I hope is that I can help a small child avoid some of that if they can understand that, to accept the yuck, that, sad feelings are going to happen. They don't have to feel them alone, that there are grownups around that care. And along my story, I know it seems really, really sad, but there were these wonderful teachers in my life. My 5th grade teacher, Nancy Barron, and my high school chemistry teacher, Mrs. LaPointe. And I just had so many along the way that made me feel like I was important and special and capable. And that's my resilience story. I wanted to become a school psychologist to help kids that were, going through their lives and struggling in ways that I did, and also to try to prevent any other kids from struggling in ways that I did. And so that's my hope, and that's my resilience story.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. There's so many points in there where I just feel something in common with you, but also some of the things that I was hearing, or you remember the names of those teachers, that's sticking out in my head as, the charismatic adult, like all these years later, you remember their first and last name.
Yeah.
That person was so meaningful to you. Thank you for sharing that. And Caren, what about you? Do you have a resilience story? You just woke up one day and you were like, I'm writing this workbook on resilience.
Well, as I said, so as you said in my bio, in 2017, I wrote a book called The Grit Guide for Teens. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm very gritty. People, yeah, it's very nice. We just got a cute comment. I completed my first marathon. I'm not trying to be braggy here, but I'm saying I was kind of on top of my world. And then all of a sudden I got sick I didn't know what was going on with me. So for me, in terms of my childhood, I feel really blessed. I feel like, that wasn't the area that I had to kind of figure out my own resilience, but it was more as an adult. And then all of a sudden I just didn't feel well. And I was going to doctors and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And ultimately, I found out that I had a growth on my pituitary that was making stress hormones. So I literally was producing cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And I had to get surgery, like brain surgery. And it took a long time to recover. And for somebody who knows me, sitting still is not, and patience is not my superpower strength. So, it was just really hard. And a lot of those techniques that I talk about, and that's interesting how we talk about with the ages, the self-compassion break, Kristen Neff's work on being self-compassion, were things that I really relied on during this time that I was really struggling, and accepting the yuck, and again, the mindset and the support. And so really, it's a personal kind of journey and a personal message in here from the things that I found that were really helpful, even as an adult, and I know would still be really helpful for kids.
That is incredible, amazing, and I would love, if we have a couple more minutes, if we're okay, I would love to hear from Bob and Ken, because it's so interesting, the kind of non-linearity of background, and then how personal and professional all like sort of come together in this beautiful work that you manifest into the world. And I would love to hear, Bob, from you, if you have a resilience story, sort of what brought you to the work that you have been doing.
Well, there are probably several. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and moved to Massachusetts to do my graduate training, and then out to Denver, and then back to Massachusetts. One is having two parents who were immigrants also, and just seeing what they went through in order to raise four sons. I think I often talk about those events, though, that really shape it. So I'll just mention two. I think I became very interested. I didn't realize at the time, when I was entering my senior year in high school, I had a brother in the Air Force who was killed before they even called it a terrorist attack. He flew cargo planes, and someone put a bomb in the cargo plane, and he was killed. And processing that, and there were a couple of counselors. They didn't even call them counselors. One was a social studies teacher at New Utrecht High School in Brooklyn, New York. Who really took me under his wing, had known my brother, and he actually asked me to help out an hour a week in his office. Little did I know that some of the principles I was going to write about later were very helpful. I also started understanding more how my parents may have handled it very differently than I might have handled the loss, and having other people available, because it was very tough. It was so painful. Having other people available was very just amazingly helpful. And that's why I got very interested also in terms of resilience, the issue of loss. And one of my books a couple of years ago, which I co-edited with a minister, was Insights into Morality, Insights into Meaningful Living, having to do with mortality. I said morality, mortality. About that. Maybe it's morality also. And the other thing was, I think those all may have led me, those things, into psychology and resilience. But, one of my first main jobs was running an inpatient psychiatric unit at McLean Hospital. And when you're running a unit where kids are there because a lot of them were out of control, it really forces you to start thinking about, rather than, because my mindset was, these kids have to know who's boss and there have to be rules. And, it gets to something that's been emphasized certainly before. The relationship is everything. And it also led me to research a book for a year and write a book about how to discipline children and adolescents in ways where they will be more hopeful and resilient, and develop self-worth rather than more angry and resentful. And so there are these different experiences along the way. And I'll add just one more point. Stephen Jobs, in his incredible commencement speech at Stanford, said, and it really ties to the question you raised, Renee. He said, too often connect the dots going forwards. If we do this, this will happen. This, he said, what's really important in life is also to connect the dots going backwards. And you're going to have experiences now that may seem important, may not, but 5 years from now, you'll look back and say, if this child for a teacher had not come into my life, I would not be where I am today. And I can honestly say there are a number of kids running a school in a psychiatric hospital. I can honestly say, if they had not come into my life, I don't know if I would have developed a resilience model. So a little word, along the way, there were these different experiences.
I think it's incredible. Thank you. Thank you also for sharing. It also is, I think, helpful when our kids are young to be able to hear us looking backwards and connecting those dots, because as you said, sometimes you're in that moment and you're like, why is this happening? There's no meaning to this, right?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, we're creating those quote dots. It's a funny word too, but we're creating those dots for our children now. And that's why I often ask 5, 10 years from now, if you asked your children to describe you, what do you hope they would say? And what are you saying or doing so they're likely to say this?
Beautiful. Thank you. And Ken, we need to hear your story. What brought you to what I had to, I have to say this, guys. And Ken, I'm so sorry. I had to cut your bio by like 75% because you've done so many amazing things. So how did you come to the work that you do?
So I'm happy to share. It of course could take hours, but before I share, I want to say something to the people who are listening. If you don't have a resilience story that is dramatic, wonderful. Our goal is not to have these dramatic resilience stories. Our goal is to understand that life gives us opportunities every day to grow. So you don't have to have a dramatic story to understand how important this is. With that said, there's a few things for me. I'm 60. I've had an amazing life, but when I was 17, I was deeply, deeply and darkly depressed for a short period of time. And everything I hated about me was all the things that are actually the best things about me. My sensitivity, my pathologic intuition, like all these things that have made me really a good daddy and husband and doctor were the things I hated about me. So number one is I wanted to make it different for other teenagers. And then along my educational journey, I was blessed to cumulatively spend a period of years with the Lakota Nation, South Dakota, which is a deeply oppressed, marginalized population that also has a spirit that is absolutely remarkable. And I learned so much about resilience and human spirit from the Lakota Nation. And next, I've worked with youth enduring homelessness for 40 years. And what I've learned is that some of the youth who would be described by other people as at risk, which is a term I reject, but made risky from their environment, are also some of the most deeply compassionate and loving human beings you're ever going to meet when you make them feel safe. And finally, I married into a family that is the embodiment of resilience and are the most loving people I've ever met. My father-in-law escaped Majdanek and lived in a sewer for 3 years. My mother-in-law is the last survivor of the first transport in Auschwitz, and she'll be 97 in a month. And she is the most loving human being you're going to meet, as was my father-in-law. But they lost essentially their whole families. So I married into that family and, of course, have it, to extend in my own background as well, the intergenerational trauma. But the point is that we don't want that. Like, that's not what we want. We want to build human connection so that we can thrive. And every experience we have, we want to show our children. We want to not look like the ducks that are gliding in the water, because that's not real. We want to be showing our children in everyday life. God forbid that we have to experience the really bad things again. But in everyday life, we want to show people that we're paddling on top of the water and it looks effortless, but it's because we've learned how to paddle. And what that is.
I love that you said that. I often say to my kids, look under the duck. They're like, what? What are you saying? What does that mean?
Right.
I have a follow-up question, and I'm hoping to kind of tie this all together. But Ken, you said something I think that just I feel like will hit home with a lot of parents, which is when you were 17 and you were in that dark place and you were feeling very disconnected. And then you said, now you're 60 and your life is beautiful. And you look back and the things that you love most about yourself were the things that you were loathing, at that time. And I feel like that happens with kids and parents often, especially at that age and that teenage age, where teenagers can, frankly, be self loathing and let that out. And a parent can come and say, but that's what's great about you. This thing that you hate about yourself, that's what's so great about you. And a teen might reject that. It needs to be an uncovering, maybe a discovery that they have on their own. How do we help parents guide their kids through that uncovery discovery process? If everyone can kind of just give their advice on that, I think maybe we can wrap on that. Ken, you can go first.
Okay, so the first thing you need to know is I don't casually endorse books. That's the first thing you need to know. And what I loved about this particular workbook is that it did not say move past your emotions. It said understand your emotions and seek help. That's number one. Number two, my life's work is strength-based communication. I have a textbook on strength-based communication. Strength-based communication is not praising the child. It's not saying what's good about them. It is knowing them in all of their full and rich context and knowing them fully and looking for all that is good and right, their character strengths. That is the most protective force in a human being's life. So what I would say to parents is this: nobody knows your child like you do. And when you see them in their wholeness, but are rooted in their goodness, that's what is the most powerful thing in the kid's life. Because when times are tough and everyone else is pointing out the problem, you're the one who's going to remember who the kid is.
Right.
And the one other point that's been said, we want that person to be the parent. And when it is, the rest of us in the universe are additive. But most of my work is actually working with youth who are enduring homelessness. So I acknowledge that parents are not always there. And that's why the rest of us, rather than just being additive, we become vitally critical. So if you're into this book, which you should be, don't just think about your own child, think about your community's children.
Incredible. Thank you. Bob, how do we help our kids tap into their natural, amazing abundance and strengths? What can a parent do?
Well, first of all, just to build upon some of what was said already, is when our kids are distressed, a lot of them don't want us to solve the problems. They have to feel that we are there. And, when I've done a lot of family therapy, just a parent being able to say to a kid, whether a young kid or a teenager, that they are there, that if the child wants to speak about something, and accepting the child. Now, I'm not saying any of this is easy. I mean, we could talk about all this, but it's a real process that takes place. The other thing is, and I'll try to quickly say this, is whenever I meet with parents, as I said, I will also ask, what are your child's interests and strengths? And just to give you one quick example, it was a young kid, it was 7 years old. Parents came in to see me. The child was having difficulty, he had learning problems. He was somewhat, as the father described, shy. And the father loved sports. And there was a disconnect. This father was wonderful. He actually said, I had a dream when my son was born that I would do with him what I did with my father, play ball, whatever. And the father actually teared up at one point, said, I feel I'm losing my son. So I said, well, what is your son interested in? And he said, and the mother also quickly said, he loves to draw. And the father then plainly said, but you know what? I don't like to draw. And I said to the father in a nice way, especially with young kids, we have to accommodate more to their interests than they'll accommodate to ours. The next day, the father called me. He said, what a powerful statement. He said, I just signed myself and my son up for an art class in a museum here in Boston. The father called me after the first art class. He said, it was so wonderful to see the joy in my son's face as he was doing this activity. And there's a wonderful concept about the goodness of fit between parents and kids. No kid comes into the world to make us feel like a good parent. And the goodness of fit notion is for us to look at their interests. And with my own sons, I found in research I did, whatever, even as teenagers, we would have a special time alone. Because when I did research, I found teenagers often like the time alone rather than family time. And just one more example, because it triggered so much. We used to go out. It was easy with only two sons. 1 week, one son, 1 week, the other. I would take them out while my wife took the other, just to a hamburger place. And when my son Rich went off to college the first time, and then he came back at the first intercession or whatever it was, the first thing he said is, "Are we still going to do the Wednesday night thing?" So it ties to what we talked about, those connections, those moments. And that's why I've been writing a lot, as Caren knows, about these micro moments, little gestures, little things that 40, 50 years later, when I did research about what people remembered about their parents or teachers, it was like it was yesterday. And so again, it gets back to those connections we make, and they could be the briefest moments.
Love that. That brings to mind my dad and I. He would take me to Denny's. It's like our place for deep and meaningful conversations. And anytime I ever pass a Denny's anywhere in the world, my heart just skips a few beats.
We went to the ground round, but I'm not even sure they exist anymore.
Caren, tell us, how do we, people are going out and they are buying this workbook, this beautiful workbook. They are going to sit with their kids and they want to nurture, they want to uncover, they want to help them tap in. It doesn't have to be about the workbook, but give us some words of wisdom on how parents can connect with their kids to be able to connect with themselves, really.
Well, I like what Bob was saying. I feel like sometimes, and I like what Ken was saying also, I feel like sometimes there are these big, like not everyone, hopefully, God forbid, will have what happened to me or what happened to Rebecca, but I feel like it is in those micro moments. And I know that it's really difficult even for educators today. There's a lot of stress, and it's been challenging working, in a school. And I think that if we can all remember that it doesn't have to be big, it can be those small, those micro moments. There's one teacher on my floor who has this whole elaborate way she greets students, and I feel like that's so powerful. And just these small things that we can do can really, really make a difference. I feel like that's something I feel for me, I do feel like I want people to remember about connection. I also feel like community and culture. I think, I don't want people sometimes, especially when I wrote the Grit Guide for Teens, one of the criticisms of grit is, you don't want to say just this is something for the individual to do, just to pick you up by your bootstraps, or even with resilience, that resilience just rests in the individual. I want this, and I so feel really blessed that we are doing this tonight, is like creating these ripples, that we're doing this and trying to encourage communities, structures, organizations, even like, things like the Boys and Girls Club, things like that, so that it's not just on the individual, but that we make societal and cultural changes to build resilience.
Amazing. And Rebecca, please add your thoughts. We'd love to hear them.
It's what everyone's been saying has been so moving, and it's so beautiful. It reminds me of something that Stephen Hayes recently said in an interview. He said, "Love isn't everything, it's the only thing." And I think it's so beautiful and true. And when we understand that love means, accepting the child in front of us and working with that child to bring out their true self, their best self, it's just so powerful. And I'm so excited that the book is out in the world. I'm so excited to be with you all. It just feels really special.
Yeah. And I just want to take a moment to really, really thank you. I know everyone, first of all, here or listening to us have very, very busy lives. So I really, really appreciate everybody coming out. And I really appreciate you, Renee, and Bob, and Ken, and of course, Rebecca, for sharing this journey with us. I feel like, it just, we wanted to make this a powerful book launch so that people come out and people can kind of gain these skills. And that's really ultimately, where I see this is like why I did this, is that my hope is really to help people to get these skills so that they can have, to cope with stress, but to Ken's point, to flourish.
Love it. So I will say that I also do not casually endorse books. I love this workbook. It is amazing. It is 30% off until tomorrow. The link is there. Please go get this book. You will not regret it. Go get this workbook. And Rebecca, you were talking about love. So speaking of love, everyone is out here because we love to listen to you guys. We love to learn about resilience. We love to share. So thank you guys for being here. We really, truly appreciate it. Thank you for everyone. And we know it's late or it's early or maybe it's even in the middle of the night around the world. We are so grateful that you all showed up. Ken, Bob, Caren, Rebecca, thank you very much. This has been a very rich evening. I also didn't have to put my kids to bed. Just a little joke, but it's okay. All right, guys, get the book, get the Resilience Workbook for Kids. And thank you all very, very much. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everyone.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.